Right now, foreign affairs columnist for the New York Times, Tom Friedman. Tom's book, From Beirut to Jerusalem, is on sale now. And his recent piece for the New York Times is titled The Smart Way for Trump to End the Israel-Iran War. Tom, not a lot of easy choices here in front of the president this morning. The possibility to disarm Iran and to stop them from developing nuclear weapons. But on the other side of that ledger, of course, all we have to do is look back to the consequences of the Iraq invasion 22 years ago. So what's the president's best step forward, in your opinion?
Well, Joe, since this started, I've been advocating coercive diplomacy. The Israelis have provided the coercion very effectively. They've done enormous damage to Iran's military capacities, its missiles, and its nuclear supply chain. I think now would be a good time for the diplomacy side to basically for Trump to send Witkoff back to say, we made you an offer before. We're going to make you an offer one last time. You see what Israel's capable of. You see where you are. You see what we're capable of. Are you ready to basically disassemble your nuclear program under the auspices of the International Atomic Energy Commission? And if you do, we will move on and reduce this threat. But I think now is the time to make that offer. You know, Joe, back in 1991, I'm an old guy, I was with Jim Baker when he met with Tariq Aziz in Geneva on the eve of Gulf War I and made a very similar offer. The world saw that. It gave America enormous legitimacy. Then when Tariq Aziz regrettably, as Baker said, turned us down, it gave the United States the ability to put a whole global coalition together against Iraq. And I would be sending our Secretary of State, or whoever is Secretary of State in this administration, I have no clue anymore, who does the negotiating, to be making the same kind of offer to the Iranians right now.
So, Tom, given all that has happened in the last 5 or 6 days, and given all that might happen within the next 3 or 4 days, apparently, with bunker buster bombs and talk and everything like that, this increasingly volatile region of the world, what is going on in Riyadh and Dubai? What is going on there?
Well, Mike, actually, let me talk about both Riyadh and Dubai, and even more importantly, in Beirut, Damascus, and Baghdad. You know, we tend to look at this conflict as simply between Iran and Israel. In fact, the people rooting for this Iranian regime to be defanged are not just Israelis. They're Lebanese, they're Syrians, they're Iraqis, who have lived under the boot of Iranian colonialism since 1979. Iran's business model in the Middle East was to hire Arab Shiites to kill Arab Sunnis in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, and through that, keep these countries permanently on a boil, unable to basically coalesce any kind of democratic alternative. Iran provided the foot soldiers through Hezbollah for Bashar Assad in Syria to murder thousands of his people in order to stay in power. So you have a whole Arab audience, forget the Gulfies, who are quietly, I can tell you, rooting for Israel to take out the Iranian threat. They have benefited already enormously from the weakening of Iran. Lebanon now has a really good prime minister, a really good president. Syria has a democratic option, and Iraq actually is feeling a lot easier, also has its own frail democracy. So nothing would be more welcome in these countries, let alone in Israel, than to see the end of Iranian imperialism. This is a bad regime, and it's been bad for Arabs every bit as much as Jews.
So, Tom, let's get your take on a topic of conversation we had a short time ago. Let's say the U.S. does go through this. President Trump gives the go-ahead, and these bunker buster bombs are used, and this devastation that follows for Iran. What comes the day after? What comes the day after in Iran, particularly for the United States? You know, and if the Colin Powell maxim of "if you break it, you buy it." What does it look like next?
Just for the record, I wrote a column February 12th, 2003, excuse me, called You Break It, You Own It, the Pottery Store Rule. That started with me before the Iraq War.
You get credit then.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think we can't predict, but I do believe that, first of all, what worries me is that the Iranian leader is completely disconnected. How much information can he be getting? He's sitting in a bunker somewhere hiding. His entire top military and military intelligence leadership has been wiped out. And so who knows how much he even understands about what's going on. But that said, somebody there does. And I do believe that if we made one last attempt at coercive diplomacy, and again, I would be demanding the end of their nuclear program. Who knows what they would answer? Now, I think on one hand, you have to say, Karim Sajidpour, the Iran expert at Carnegie, likes to say the Iranians are homicidal but not suicidal. And so I think if we did go to war with them or take out this nuclear facility, they'd have a big decision whether they attack our forces, because that would truly mean the end of their regime. But that's on day one, or that's the morning after. What I'm always looking at in the Middle East, Jonathan, is the morning after the morning after. That's when things get really interesting. And interesting, not always in a pleasant way. Does the regime begin to crumble? We're talking about a country of 95 million people. What kind of disorder flows from there? Do you get a crazy general there who decides to sink some tankers in the Straits of Hormuz? It's just totally unpredictable, and I wouldn't even attempt to try to say what could happen. Right now, I'm focused on this idea of we've developed the coercion very effectively. Let's give one more shot at diplomacy.
So Tom, let me ask you a couple of questions. Again, no easy answers here, but it's very easy for us to sketch out, because it's so probable, the chaos that would flow from the toppling of the regime in Iran. It is a frightening specter. We've seen it time and time again, even over the past 20, 25 years. On the other side of that ledger, though, is, again, something I said earlier that an old Southern member of the Armed Services Committee told me one time: if you attack the snake, you better kill the snake. If Israel, if the United States does not follow through with the destruction of their nuclear program, wouldn't Iran be motivated to move more quickly toward putting that nuclear program back together and building a bomb and using it against us?
I'm not sure they would use it against us, but certainly they could use it against Israel. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Joe, this is a hellish problem. It's a hellish choice. It always has been. And that's why I favor a kind of step-by-step, methodical approach to it. I want the whole world to see that what Iran has, every effort we made to avoid war, because if there is a war, Joe, it's going to be a long war, and you want maximum legitimacy. You want the world behind this. That also creates leverage. And so how you get into this war, I think, really matters. I would say another thing, Joe, Donald Trump is now paying for the fact that he appointed a cabinet of knuckleheads. He's got a defense minister who is a former Sunday weekend host on Fox. His DNI, he's repudiated because she's another knucklehead. You hire clowns, you get a circus. And who is in the room there giving him advice right now? That is really scary. And this is why, when you hire people just for their slavish loyalty to you, not for their expertise and willingness to say no to you and to question you, that is really scary to me. And he's paying the price for that right now.
And the next thing to bring up, and again, you've obviously been through the first Gulf War, reporting on it from deep inside the administration and across the Middle East. The second Gulf War, I know you remember George W. Bush's Axis of Evil speech. It always struck many as tragically ironic that in the Axis of Evil, George W. Bush decided to go to war with the one member of that axis that was the furthest away from developing nuclear weapons, developing weapons of mass destruction. And I remember reading a column years ago where you had talked to somebody in Tehran who said, "Why didn't you guys come here? We're the ones who needed regime change most of all." This is the best opportunity to change out this regime that has been the epicenter of global terrorism since 1979. Again, it just seems this is an existential bet either way the president goes with it. Talk about what the world looks like, though, with the threat of a nuclear Iran removed?
Yeah, I think, Joe, I'm among that group that believes that, this is it's not an exact analogy, but it's a Berlin Wall kind of moment, in that this Iranian regime is a really bad actor, not just regionally, most of all, of course, for its own people. We're talking about a country that is an incredible civilization, going back thousands of years. The potential of the Persian nation, to contribute to the region and to the world is enormous, and that has been completely stifled by this regime. I mean, and it's a tragedy for these people. But this regime has also stifled the opportunities of Lebanon, of Syria, of Iraq. It is no accident, Joe, that people have pointed out the president of Syria today, Syria's like one country that hasn't even given the titular, you shouldn't do this, America. Like, there are just a lot of Arabs really rooting for this bad regime to leave. That's on the upside. On the downside, it's a vast country. And instability from there can really spill all over, and the transition will not be overnight. We're not going to go from this regime, to a wonderful leader. And therefore, I say what I say in Iraq and today. If you're going to do this, this is a long road. You want maximum legitimacy to do this, and the maximum legitimacy is produced by going about this in a very systematic way. Israel has generated enormous coercive power on the Iranians. Whatever they're saying, they are really hurting. And the Israelis aren't done, okay? Let's leverage that so the whole world sees. For one last time, we're going to go to this regime and say, you need to end this program in a verifiable way right now, okay? And if you don't, all right, that coercion is going to go to its final conclusion. Let the whole world see that we are avoiding war every way we possibly can. But the world will not be a stable place if this regime is allowed to pursue this nuclear program, which is clearly not about generating electricity.
So, Tom, you've mentioned the danger of the lack of counsel around President Trump. What happens if this war phases out, if we participate in the bombing and we think, okay, we've done our job? What's your sense of our ability to defend ourselves against the very, very excellent cyber attack people who come out of Iran? They really know cyber. They know cyber warfare.
Honestly, Mike, I think if the war were to go ahead, Iran would be in disarray after this. I mean, if the war is going ahead, if we blow up all its nuclear facilities, they've been decapitated militarily. I think the biggest fear I have, what do we learn from all these Middle East wars, from the decapitation of Gaddafi, for instance, to the decapitation of Saddam Hussein, that in the Middle East, the alternative to autocracy is not democracy. It's very often disorder. Okay, we'd like to think we get rid of a bad regime, a good one comes. That's not necessarily what happens here. We'd be very lucky if that happens. And it's the spread of disorder and trying to manage disorder spilling out from a giant country like Iran, which I think would be the biggest diplomatic and security challenge from this, and trying to keep this place together. So it may be inevitable, it may be the necessary condition, but what we were worried about with the collapse of the Soviet Union, what was spreading disorder. We got lucky because there was a Gorbachev. Could we get lucky and there emerge an Iranian Gorbachev? We might, absolutely. All I'm saying is let's go about this in the most methodical way, because we're going to need the maximum help, the maximum legitimacy to manage what would be a giant mess after this.
It's such an extraordinarily important point. We always talk about what happens the day after a war, or as Tom says, the day after a war ends. Tom's point here is so important. We need to be concerned here about what happens the days, the weeks before the war, and building the legitimacy that's needed worldwide, globally, because this is not going to be a one-and-done operation. This is going to require buy-in from our allies and even those who don't consider themselves to be natural allies of the United States or Israel.
New York Times columnist Tom Friedman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
Go ahead.
I want to say that my point in my column yesterday is that we need to pair two things. One is coercive diplomacy in the Middle East, and the other is support for a Palestinian-Israeli peace process in Gaza, because that's not over either, let's remember. And that also enhances our legitimacy if we're seen as pursuing both at the same time.